Sriram, I want to start with you. Microsoft announced a slew of strategies in the AI side. Satya had come and met Flipkart and discussed something, right? But the major agenda for us is where do we stand in the world globally with all these tectonic changes are happening. There are mega trends like population growth is huge. There are people who think that jobs are going to go away, and India generates 1 million engineers every year. But there is opportunity, right, for all of them. So you want to talk about it from the Microsoft's innovation perspective?
Yeah, I think in terms of megatrends, right? One megatrend that is very clear is that in terms of technology, the virtual world and the real world are no longer separate from each other. Okay. Right? I did my PhD at Berkeley, and at that time, the only things that you could connect to the internet are things that somebody would type up. If somebody had typed up something, then you can search for it, right? But if something's in the real world, it doesn't necessarily connect to a computer. But if you look at cameras and sensors and all these kinds of things, right? The real world is already now part of the virtual world, right? My mom was able to push a button and out comes a car. so I think that's a big trend. And the second trend, obviously, is the fact that data is the new oil, and there's so much data, and intelligence driven by machine learning and AI is the new machine. I think there's no escape from that as well. So you're talking about India. I think what's interesting about India is that India is such a diverse country, and it's a really big country, right? So I think we in India have the opportunity, because we have so many languages, we have so many people with different socioeconomic backgrounds, rural, urban, there's so much diversity in India, that I think if India manages to grab the opportunity and build tech that reaches all these people, then I think we'll build things that will be very influential globally.
You're basically saying that focus on India first, and then focus on the global problems.
So I think we can be inspired by India, and I think solutions that are inspired by India will have huge scope for impacting the globe because of the constraints and the scale and the diversity that India has.
Okay. Sanket, do you want to talk about some of the global trends that are affecting India's chances of being the top innovator in the world?
Sure. So the way I look at it, the startup ecosystem follows a paradigm similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You satisfy your basic requirements first, and from there you actualize. And I like to characterize those as the 3 T's. One is technology, one is talent, and the other one is target market, right? So on the technology front, today, any company through a computer and a browser can avail of the greatest technologies that the largest companies in the world are doing. And especially in India, there's a 3-letter acronym that makes it very much possible, EMI, which is the fundamental concept behind the cloud. So that's a great enabler. On the talent side, what I would like to say is the big trend I am seeing is going from the conservative, let me get a nice steady job and have a steady income. Talent is available in abundance who are adventurous and risk takers and are self-learning. So they are actually on their own able to pick up the latest technologies, whatever. There's always this debate about, is India actually graduating fully trained engineers? It doesn't matter anymore. These people can train themselves. And the final thing is anybody sitting in India, so of course, naturally, a company in India would first think of the Indian market. They would do that. But today, sitting in India, you can actually target maybe a market in Ethiopia, right? Because digital marketing is very advanced, all kinds of data is available. These 3 T's are allowing these companies to now match what was being done in Silicon Valley for very long. And I think this is the thing that's going to be the foundation for us to actualize. And the pace of improvements and growth is just tremendous right now.
It's interesting, right? The governments cannot catch up with this change. It's the young people who are making this change happen. Yeah, we have Alok here from GE. No problem. He's going to get a coffee. So, come along, no problem. So yeah, I mean, Naga, why don't you take this question? I mean, you talk to all the startups, and so is policymaking keeping up with this kind of a change? that Sanket suggested?
So I think policy making really depends on what are you trying to solve, right? There are some, like, if you take the example of e-tailers or Uber or whatever, they are ahead of it. And it's not possible for the government to think of all possible scenarios. No, it's not necessarily India, but across the world. So in some cases, you'll have policy that is going to be lagging the technology. But I think that's fair because what do you do? Who could have envisaged that Uber would become so big or ride sharing would become so big or, like what Airbnb does, right? So I think people will catch up. But I think where policy will become more important is on the more macro trends in terms of the impact. Like, if AI is going to happen, what is going to be happening 5 years down the road? And how, like we talked in the previous session on the employment, right? So I think the government has to worry about the social impact of these technologies and what is going to happen in the 5-year, 10-year horizon, and then make policies to address those concerns rather than trying to solve saying, I will not let Uber do this, I will not let Airbnb do this. I don't think they should get into that. But they should look at 5-10-year horizon on what is the impact of these technologies coming to the market and how to manage it socially.
I completely agree. I mean, the government's trying to sell a narrative, and corporates are also trying to sell a narrative, right? So, Ajay, you could take the next question, but it's on these lines as well. So, between narratives, right, IoT, AI, what is reality? I mean, nobody knows today. I mean, we talk about narrow AI suddenly. Over the last 3 months, everyone's saying narrow AI, and later on, it's going to be real artificial intelligence.
Well, yeah. So, okay. So narrow AI is a form of telling us that, hey, AI is not very bad, and then we can survive with narrow AI for now, and don't worry about the real AI when the machines are going to take over the world or something like that. So that's just a narrative to kind of satisfy ourselves in the short term, right? But let me kind of get back to what what we kind of spoke in the beginning, right? I know that data is the new oil, and this term is being used over and over again. I was talking to our CTO yesterday, and very interestingly, not really. Data is more powerful than oil because you sell somebody a barrel of oil today, so you give it to him, you don't have that oil with you, you take money from him. But data is something that you can keep selling the same thing to different people over and over and over again. So from an economic inflection point, I see that there's a lot possible using data. India has over 1 billion people who are generating a lot of data, putting it on social channels, putting it everywhere, and somebody else is monetizing it big time. And we are not actually putting a premium on that data that we ourselves are generating and putting it out there. We are not matured at a point where we can take advantage of those kind of economies today. We don't have the means. There's a lot of potential, but there's somebody else monetizing. Let's talk about, let's say, health data, right? So we run a startup accelerator, and we do have a company that's in digital health, for example, right? I'm a little familiar with that space now. So people go get scans done, let's say, right? So you're actually giving your data to somebody who is then going to anonymize it and then use it to trend and do stuff on top of that data. But you're actually paying money to give your data. So there's a very, very interesting thing happening out here. So we don't realize the value of data that we are generating, which is why data is actually the currency of the digital economy. So once we realize how you can actually monetize these things, things are going to change for India.
So yeah, one is data monetization, right? My real question is, GE has been doing data monetization for the longest of time, before anybody, right? Your jet engines, right? Your windmills, right? You didn't need any startup to do it, right? So why do you have to work with startups today? Would you like to work with startups at all?
Yeah, absolutely. See, what happens is that startups give you a very strong ability to fail fast and to pivot, right? It enhances your risk taking. And every exponential technology, when it starts, it's a straight line with a very small slope. And at that time, you don't really realize the potential of what this technology is going to give, right? And that is the time when risk taking is very difficult. That ability for startups is very important. So we do a lot of work on our own because we believe in this, and we believe that getting onto that exponential curve now is more important, because once it starts taking the turn, it's almost impossible to catch up. And we are also very happy where we want to take help from a startup to engage with them as well. But we are ourselves pretty bullish on this revolution, I would say, in India and investing on it. And we talked about the ecosystem. I think the ecosystem in India is really the best that we've had ever. One, because of this startup culture which enables everybody to take risks and fail fast and pivot. Secondly, I mean, think about when have we, our academic institutions started working with industries. I mean, we have, if you see the top 100 institutes, none of the Indian academic institutions come in that, but now government is incentivizing them to work with the industry, and that also allows us to dramatically scale. Scale has been the problem of our country. And this ecosystem today allows us to scale brilliantly, and that's what we see.
So now let me take it back to Subbu, because from a manufacturer's perspective, he comes to a system integrator and he says that the world is changing. Maybe I have factories running completely on robotics. There's a lot of data generated, predictive, prescriptive maintenance. We were body shopping in the past. Let's be honest about the IT services industry, but you're all changing and evolving, and you all have the narrative of AI, ML, design thinking, right? How do you look at integrating this entire ecosystem? And Naga, you can come in later saying how they can play a role in actually changing India's IT talent, right? They set it in motion in 91 all the way up till 2010, and then they went through a slump, right?
I think you rightly said, I'm from Mindtree, and we are a software services organization. And as you rightly said, the business has always been intellect, and now the focus is more on IP, the intellectual property, right? So if you look at the way we engage with the customers and what we do for the customers, in a typical engagement, it is a customer's IP. And we did file few patents for innovation, but it all belongs to the customer as well, right? So to increase our value to the customer, what we have done is either you can call it as a platform or a solution accelerator. And we have done it in two ways and two forms. That is, one, we have identified an opportunity and built things in-house, or we looked at the startup ecosystem and then seen if those accelerators are fitting into our scheme of things, and we went ahead and acquired them or worked closely with them, right? So for example, I'll give you two examples that we have done. In the retail space, we have developed our own IP. It's called Fluorescence, wherein we can look at the video and analytics behind it to see who is that potential customer who is going to buy based on the data that you have seen behind of his shopping pattern and so on, and then help the person on the floor to go and help him so that the real sale would happen, right? So that way, my customers would be happy to see on how to monetize the time that they have on the floor with the customer for a real sale, right? And if you look at a second aspect, we did acquire a company in the US where they have a product that they have developed which is used at the pause. So wherein, when you are checking out, based on the statistics that I have collected in the past, I can aid the person at the pause to say what more I can do for that particular customer, right? So that way, we look at both the aspects in terms of what is that is available in the ecosystem of startups, and if that fits into the scheme of things and offerings that we do for our customers, we either partner with them or we go and acquire them and then offer those services to our customers, or look at that as a solution within our context and then see if we can develop that in-house. That's how we have been looking
How
at
many
it.
startups have you worked with so far as partners?
So I don't have the exact data, but quite a good number of startups. I think our our chairman personally drives it. KK is closely involved with the startup community, and then he closely drives that.
So Naga, where can they add value? You had a software services company.
Yeah, so like if you look at where the software services industry is evolving, I don't think anybody in this room will even remember waterfall model, right? I mean, the 90s and all, you had the waterfall model.
We remember it.
You want to give them a short primer?
Yeah, and I run a project for 3 to 5 years, and we don't know what the code is going to look like at the end, and 200 people on the project, so on and so forth. I think the entire industry has changed, all DevOps, and you don't even run your own data center. It's run by Amazon or somebody else. So I think the industry has changed completely, and hence the customers are demanding very different kind of approach from all their vendors as well. where they look at, look, don't tell me you can do this, tell me what innovation can you bring me to the table, right? So hence hence the entire scope of the industry is changed, and that's the reason why you see all the large services companies in India always now working with some startup or the other, right? Wipro is doing it, Mindtree is doing it, and Accenture is doing it. So they're all very hungry to work with startups, and also internally they're changing to say, there has to be more focus on innovation. Don't just tell me you can maintain. Sorry, sir, tell me what is that we're doing in terms of innovation. So I think the industry phase itself is changing. It's changing, absolutely.
Typically I run into a lot of startups all the time, and a lot of the global companies come and tell me that you guys are so good at the narrative. They'll say you're XXX.ai, I'm an AI, I'm an ML company, I'm a cloud company.
Every startup is an AI.
So what confuses me is, why are we getting caught up in the narrative? Is it because the startup ecosystem still wants great valuations and wants to get acquired by each and every one of you? And Naga, that's why you've not invested in many companies yet, right? You've done only 2 big investments.
We've done 4, but I think my take on the matter is if you're talking to a good entrepreneur, then they will downplay these things because they know they're trying to solve a problem, and what technology you're trying to solve a problem is immaterial. As long as you're solving the customer's problem, that's what is required, whether you use deep learning, ML, whatever, it doesn't really matter. Guys who are not sure of what they're doing, I think they're trying to blow things.
Just give me one example, right? Each and every one of you. You meet a startup, when do you know they're bullshit? When do you know a startup?
I think, in the first 5 minutes, typically,
Give me an example. Go ahead, give me an example.
So so bullshitting is like when they come and tell me I'm going to solve the entire world's hunger, then I know they're bullshitting, right? Many of them try and do that. Or they come and say they have no experience in some area, but they'll say I know how to solve this problem, and then I question myself and say, how the hell are you even telling me, because you have no visibility to the actual problem the customer face here. Why are you doing it? So as soon as someone can't relate themselves to the customer, they're trying to tell me what I'm trying to do, then I know they're bullshitting. Right? It's not the technology.
Sanket, you want to take it?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I think it's directly proportional to the number of buzzwords per sentence.
Applause, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think, I run an organization with researchers, PhD type people, right? And in an organization like mine, we cut through all the crap and get to the essence rather quickly, right? People, leave their egos out the door, come in, and they start cutting through all the nonsense and talk facts.
That's
and
exactly
if people are
what
not
I'm
able to do
asking.
that, then they lose respect immediately.
See, how much of it is you being a hardcore engineer, right? I mean, you go to all these accelerator programs, and you must be getting fed up, right? It's more of a PR activity now.
Not really. I think, in our organization, there is enough filters that happen.
Okay.
And there is enough filtration in the system that, I don't personally go to a lot of them. I think things get filtered, and the ones that
How many have you met over the last 6 months? And do you really think these companies can go global?
I mean, one thing I have seen is that among the companies that I have met through our accelerator and so on, I have found that the tech is not usually very deep, and it's usually niche, narrow.
You want to qualify that? Why is it not deep?
See, what I find is that, actually, maybe I'll put it this way, right? There is not enough of a moat or a differentiator and an aha that I see. Or maybe if there is, right, they are not able to explain it to me as well.
So many people talk about deep tech in India, but I think it's very, very difficult to find real deep tech companies in India. I resist the term deep tech, right? I think we are very good in product innovation and we are very good in technology, but deep tech requires a different kind of mindset, which we can discuss later.
When people say deep tech, right, are we so sunk in our minds that we don't know how to define it?
Yes.
Yeah,
I don't think we know what deep tech means.
I think that's part of the problem, right? So with democratization of development techniques in terms of exposure to OpenStack and availability of APIs and REST and a lot of things, right? And also there is this cloud screen in terms of, hey, with a lot of B2C companies in the place, what is deep tech? That's basically the question. And the onus for people who run accelerators on us, it's on us to actually do a good job here, right, in terms of trying to encourage the right type of companies and not really do something which only creates some kind of a startup spectacle rather than actually doing something really deep and doing something that's really engaging. For example, when you start to look at, let's say, B2B kind of businesses, right, people who are trying to build HCI kind of systems, hyperconverged infrastructure systems, or people who are trying to create security play around data security, right? Or people who are trying to play in telemetrics and autonomous driving vehicles. These are really deep tech, and these are not some things that can be stood up overnight. These actually take a couple of years, even when you're employing every open source that is known to you, because you need to have that architecture. So things that you'll have to look at is, I think what Naga touched upon is pedigree of the founders. Do you have the right kind of people? Do you have somebody like a data scientist who is also doing something like an artificial intelligence, or or do you have really people or PhDs from that space? So you got to look at those things. And believe me, like we had like 250 applications coming to in our startup accelerator, and we actually whittled down to a cohort of 6. And we are very happy because the founders are really from deep backgrounds with plenty of experiences, with experience both in abroad and here, having worked in product companies, built. So those are we encourage these kind of companies. These are not companies that are going to be selling, or doing like a cab service or something like that and kind of having big valuations, but they are creating deep valuations for themselves in the long run. It's companies that will have selling prices definitely higher than their cost prices, right? Which is real value to the market eventually. So
Sanket, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so the thing we look for in our accelerator program is companies who are trying to solve a problem, trying to classify them as deep tech, deep AI, all kinds of stuff. I think it's the wrong path, because today, everything is available as building blocks for you to, this is a hygiene factor now. If a company is not leveraging AI today, AI is a very broad term. Everybody has a different definition of AI. So let's take ML. If a company is not leveraging it, they're not with it, right? This is a hygiene factor. But what we have found is majority of the companies in India, because now I have accelerators in 6 different countries, majority of the companies in India are lacking 2 things. One is an understanding of product management. How exactly do you figure out the requirements? What is the market you're trying to address, et cetera? And the other part is, how do you do a sale? The typical attitude is, I've developed a great product.
And I'm great.
And I'm great, so they will come to me. Sales is not about that. And that's where the team comes into play. So we take a look at the composition of team very, very carefully, because ultimately, unless there's revenue coming in, it doesn't matter.
So what does GE look for in India? I mean, these guys, tell me that, there's a lot of bullshitting also, but they can cut across the crap, right? And what do you really look for as a company that manufactures great products?
Yeah, so think about it. There is a lot of enthusiasm sometimes, but that enthusiasm doesn't necessarily convert into dollars, right? So the ability to simply explain the outcome. I mean, that's what makes a lot of difference. If you can explain the outcome, and how can you get that outcome better than anybody else can, and if you can explain that to a person who actually is interested in that outcome, that's a huge differentiator. And for us, I mean, think about it in this way. We make very complicated products like aircraft engines, windmills, and all. And for us, understanding physics, understanding the domain, and then creating a solution that helps us manage that asset better is the key differentiator for our customers. Think about it in this way, right? Everybody runs on aircraft engines of GE, right, across the world. And every environment is different. If you can understand that environment in which that engine is operating, it gives you an ability to manage that engine better, and that makes an airline profitable. You have that solution, I mean, it can't come without understanding the engine.
That's exactly what I'm saying, right? The quality of people who understand that. How many college graduates understand that?
It's very difficult in India because of our education system. People go and outside and come back and understand it, but I mean, our education system needs to evolve, where the emphasis is on real outcomes rather than getting grades. Right? Correct. That has to change.
So you guys employ a lot of people, Mindtree, and you have to tell me, I mean...
See, my perspective will be slightly different from
please go on.
People who are
please
on
argue
the panel,
it out.
right? See, our engagement with startups is where we find the problem and we don't have an answer, right? Because of the virtue of working with many customers and understanding the customer problems, and then where a solution is required, and when I look at a startup, that if they have a solution that I can take it to the customer and solve that problem, so I'm like a matchmaker here, right?
So you're looking at execution skills.
Yeah, because that is what would make me believe that startup is going to be a success, right? Or that startup is now has a real solution or they're talking in the air, right? The good thing for us is that it's a joint go-to and then solve the customer problem, right? And for the startup, they may not have the reach to the customer as what they are today, because sometimes the customers also need a backup for the solution that they're offering because they're a startup, because they are not sure whether they survive tomorrow or not. But if they go along with a large organization like Mindtree, they have that backing that, okay, Mindtree is offering me a solution, so they are taking that risk or they are taking that backup of that particular startup that, yes, the overall solution will work for me. Right.
Sanket, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So we're not actually quite different. So I'll tell you why. In setting up the 8 centers, I interviewed hundreds and hundreds of companies. All of them, the biggest or most important requirement they have is access to customers. You know, being Oracle, we have 400,000 plus customers, and we have a systematic process to be able to do the connect. And it's in 2 ways, right? So one part is that there are the various products that the startups have, and we position those with the relevant customers, of course. But the other part, even more important, is we have a very extensive process of mining requirements from all of these customers and providing that data to the startups to potentially pivot, right? And the combination of those two is very, very important.
Absolutely. I think that is exactly what we both are alluding in one form or the other, that we are helping the startups to ensure that they understand the customer problem, and then we go to that customer.
So, how many of them are truly innovative? Say a scale of 1 to 10. The startups that you meet, how many are truly innovative, and how many of them really don't have to leverage on your platforms to go sell by themselves? Or should they leverage on your platforms, reach the customers like GE, and then go on to find other clients? What would you recommend? Come on, this is...
I have a question before.
Yes.
You know, this term innovation is used everywhere. I really don't know what it means.
Exactly, I'm asking you
Right,
guys.
because
so-
the fundamental thing here is you're trying to address a problem, right? And to address the problem, you're coming up with a solution, and that solution should work. Fundamentally, that's, you know, innovation, right? And because oftentimes people classify innovation as something that's never ever been done before.
Something novel.
Yeah, and so I think all of these startups are innovative, whether it's in the way they do things or in the product they do or the target segment that they're approaching, right? And we have to be very broad-minded of that. I just wanted to...
No, it's a great point you made. So you give everybody a chance, right? You listen to everybody who qualifies, right? So how do they go about it? Do they leverage your platforms and then go out reach customers? Or then how many of them can truly go by themselves and go to a Volkswagen or a Mercedes, for example, and say, I can do this project for you?
Yeah, my personal opinion is I think a startup truly wanting to do it can find ways, but what we do is help open the doors for them, right? And that's the true nature of the accelerator.
All my startups can go on their own without leverage.
They go on their own?
Yes.
Do you want to give examples?
All of them.
And what kind? Just tell me. I mean, when you say you go on their own, I mean, you just don't land up in the doors.
What I mean is, we can open up doors for them to kind of introduce them to customers in adjacent spaces where they have solutions, right? In India, the sale normally happens through application sale, right? People don't actually do a system sale, and I think you can agree with that. But, you know, so we can definitely do that, right? If there's a big data solution that's needed, they don't have to necessarily have that on a NetApp-based platform. That's not something that we mandate to the startups. That's a barrier that we would not like to put on the startups, because then that is actually limiting innovation.
So you're saying just focus on the execution. Everything else will fall in place.
No, I'm saying just focus on innovation. Don't worry
Yeah, so
about.
that's what I'm saying. I'm confused
find
what
the
innovation
best,
is.
Find the best solution that you have.
So our founder, Edison, described innovation. He said, I find out what the world needs and I then go ahead and solve that problem. I think it's about creating outcomes that solve the current problem, which enables people to make money. Yeah. And I think that's the clearest definition of innovation. Innovation just for innovation's sake, it doesn't work, because, I mean, where do you apply it? And you don't apply it, it doesn't convert the enthusiasm into dollars, and that's a very important thing.
Right.
I want to add one thing, which is that, see, sometimes where innovation can also make possible what previously was thought to be not possible. I'll give you an example from our own labs, right? So there's a bunch of researchers in our lab that are working on making machine learning work on really low-cost IoT devices. Devices that can have like 4 kilobyte memory, like an Arduino Uno or a BBC microbit, right? You know, can you actually run a machine learning algorithm there? Actually, it turns out that you can, right? So imagine what, if you can really do that, and that's actually something that we are pushing on, what can you do, right? You can now we are trying to build a smart cane for blind people that will be aware of what they're doing. We are trying to build, for example, attaching sensors to a chair that will tell you if you slouch, right? It will tell you that your position is not good, right? See, I think, one has to be, I completely agree with you that one has to be broad-minded, right? But I think innovation has various angles, and sometimes actually, things that you thought were not possible can be possible, and those will have far-reaching consequences than addressing problems of particular customers, right? So I think one has to be broad-minded to accept both kinds of things, I think. Yeah.
So to me, innovation can either solve an existing problem, but in solving the existing problem, you're giving it at least a 1 order of magnitude improvement, whether it's a cost, time, performance, productivity, whatever it is. Or like Sriram was saying, you're trying to solve a problem that was not solved before, right? If someone coming and doing the same product that can exist and then saying, look, I have TensorFlow is already there, but I'll build another TensorFlow to build my own ML.
Well,
That's not innovation.
that's also the problem with a lot of B2C
No,
innovations
correct.
happening
So
today.
they think they're innovating, but actually they're not. So to me, those are the two fundamental criteria I use for innovation. You can solve an existing problem, but you're doing it by 1 order of increment. The price has to come down by 1/10, or performance has to go up 10x, right? Anything below that is not acceptable. Or you solve something new that was not solved before. One of the two has to happen.
So, okay, for all these people out here, I mean, Volkswagen just announced that they're an operating system and they don't want to be a manufacturing company by 2030. So it'll be like a modular company, where while their IP is in manufacturing, a lot of the software designs, the design of the car come from outside. So in such a scenario, right, Oracle or a Microsoft or a NetApp, storage is going to be big in the future in cars, right? And then Mindtree as an integrator, and then I mean, predictive maintenance and analytics platforms can go in, right? So for a startup to understand all these things, it's quite impossible today. So where do they have to focus on micro elements of the entire problem of the connected car and then go after it? Or how do they go about winning clients like Volkswagen? It's a loaded question, so you guys have to take it. Who's going to take it?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some examples that we have seen. Typically, a lot of startups are founded by people who have worked in the various industries and have figured out a particular niche that they want to address, right? So if it's a car, there's this particular widget that needs to be developed in a better way with a 10x improvement or whatnot, right? And that's how they approach. And honestly, lack of information about something is not a big barrier anymore. Most of these guys know in depth the space they're getting into, right? And that's the advantage of the internet. So I've not seen personally across the world that being a great barrier. The biggest barrier is wanting to take that risk and trying to figure out how to actually go about productizing that.
So education. I want to come down to education because that's, in the end, everybody are graduates. I think our universities are today 15 years behind, according to me. I ask a lot of the startups that, what are you building your AI, so-called AI platforms, right? And some of them come a cropper. There's no narrative. But there are some good ones who say you have to learn Python, and it's a problem, right? I mean, where these guys have to come out of college, self-learn, make mistakes, come to people like you, again, learn if they can make it or not. And there is no way back into education, right? So is that the fundamental problem towards us, India being the tech stack for the world?
No,
Who wants to take this? I mean, Subbu, you're awfully quiet. You got to tell us.
No. What I wanted to start off by saying is that even at any stage in our careers, reskilling ourselves is very, very critical, right? And if we don't get to kind of advance our own learning wherever we are, we kind of feel left out. So if you look at population of India as a whole and say, how do you skill them or reskill them? I think in one of the talks in the morning, I was seeing that we need to have a system where you need to have boundless learning, where you're able to learn something, get credits, and then kind of get certified and start working on that. And probably that's the only way to go forward with, right? And even today, even in our own setup, and if you want to kind of have a Python training, there'll be a lot of sign-ons. And the reason why people are signing on is they know that that's where they need to get to kind of go ahead. If you want to have a C++ course, there will be not that many takers, right? So that's kind of the way it is. But Subbu, you.
How many of your employees are reskilled, Subbu?
So I think reskilling is one of the fundamentals to our business, right? I mean, basically, we are a software services organization. And today, if you look at, from a skills perspective, what we look at is the learnability, right? As long as the individual has not killed or died his learnability, we can reskill people with the latest technologies. With the digital age, the world is flat, and I can't say that the technologies in the US is we are 10 years behind or that 10 years ahead and so on, right? We have to be as competitive when I'm offering services to the latest technologies that are used in the industry, right? So that way, we have built our own platform to really rapidly and scalably make reskilling happen within the organization. And it's a continuous process within the organization because if you look at when I started, I still have few hairs left on my head. The technology was changing maybe about 5 years once. And today, it is changing probably every 6 months. New technologies are coming. So it's a continuous process. And then we expect and encourage Mindtree Minds to learn continuously. And the platform that we have built aids us. So that way, if you ask me a question, the number that we have trained will be much more than what Mindtree is today. We have 17,000 people, but the people going through trainings are much more than that.
So, see, Microsoft Research, we collaborate very closely with academia in India. I think more than a third of our staff are adjunct faculty in institutes. Right? I've taught courses at Indian Institute of Science. I have an adjunct faculty appointment at IIT Hyderabad. A lot of us co-supervise PhD students, and we have really deep connection with Indian academia. So when we started, right, we were actually mostly working with people at the level of masters and PhD students. But what we also realized was that there is a really strong undergraduate population in India. And around the time I graduated, I think all of us left abroad. Now a lot of people stay back, right? So we started a program called the Research Fellow Program, where people out of their undergrad come spend 1 to 2 years more as research assistants. I get more than 1,000 applications for those 30 slots I have. And people, right, this program is now 12 years old. People have gone through this program, done PhDs abroad, and they have come back, right? I think, what I find with India is that if you, even in a small way, manage to train maybe 10 people, 20 people a year, and you do it year on year, you will make a huge difference in India. Yeah. Right? I think it's, to me, actually, what I find is actually, there's two things, right? One is you can do something at scale, or you can do something at high quality and low scale. So I operate in the latter. Because actually sometimes, right, if you want to have quality, you have to do it personalized, right? And that's also incredibly useful.
I just want to add one point here. There is difference between skills training versus training for somebody for innovation and research, right?
And that actually is,
so if you want to train somebody for innovation and research, it is not for masses and for a scale. But if you want to train somebody for skills, that is for the scale.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing to that. That's an excellent point, Sriram. Thank you. The biggest problem I see is that every engineer in India is in a hurry to get a job, right? And in fact, if you take a look at a lot of companies, they will tell you that they rate an undergrad higher than a grad student that they hire, which is a shame, right? And unless there is an emphasis by all the companies to hire people with graduate degrees and advanced degrees like PhDs, the emphasis won't be on that level. And hence, the Srirams of the world will have to take 20 at a time to do it.
Right. And continuous learning need not be a degree or a course, right? So I think all of you are learning at any given point of your time in your careers, you're learning something, right? I want one of you to take this. Are you guys learning? Are you reskilling yourselves?
Actually, I run a research lab, right?
Okay.
If I don't learn, I'll be out of my job tomorrow.
Fantastic.
It's very simple.
No, absolutely, right? So we are. And I want to touch upon one point that Sankit raised earlier, saying that, internet is available to everyone. So as individuals, I think it's on us as well to kind of look out for what's out there, right? How many in this group are even aware of or thinking about something like quantum computing, right?
What's it called again?
Quantum computing.
Quantum computing.
Right? So I'm not a student of quantum physics, but I'm trying to kind of read it up because that's one of the places where we could see some major breakthroughs, which could kind of change some of the fundamentals in which you're thinking about bits and how much of code it can accommodate, and what is qubits.
So what are the applications?
No, I'm just trying to throw. This is not a discussion
what are the
on quantum.
applications so that these guys know what are the since you brought
I
it
can
up.
tell you actually.
Yes,
I think
please.
right because Microsoft Research, we are trying to build a quantum computer, not out of India. There's a quantum computing group in Santa Barbara, and in Redmond we are trying to build one. And talking about applications, right? One of the beliefs that a quantum computer can do is it can factor. Right? You can factor large numbers.
Yeah.
And the consequences of factoring a large number means that you can break any code.
Yeah.
So it's
Right?
like a
Which means that
blockchain.
RSA, no, no, the
No, no.
RSA won't be valid anymore.
It's
You can
a-
actually break encryption, which means that if that is the case, right, you have to now build something called post-quantum crypto,
Yeah.
which is resistant to those kind of attacks, right? A quantum computer it is built will be really transformative, very disruptive because you have to throw away all our security and redo it. All the crypto needs to be redone. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I mean, that's what I'm saying. The world, right? Is innovation becoming siloed, or is the world becoming islands? Right? We look at California as a different country now. We don't look at it as part of the USA anymore, right? So same as Bangalore, it's not part of Karnataka, and that's a big problem, right? People identify themselves as Bangaloreans because it's in an innovative place, it's an exciting place. So there are philosophical questions to innovation, right? I mean, are we going to see an era of information gaps, information rich versus information divide, you know?
See,
The poor, rather, information poor.
Yeah, what I find is the following, right? What I find is that the general awareness of technology trends and so on in India, I find is less, right? For example, something like quantum,
Yep.
right? If I go to Redmond or Silicon Valley and just talk about it, right? I get far more engaging conversations from all kinds of people.
No,
right?
but Sriram, even there are only two companies who are really doing it. It's D-Wave and maybe Google.
No, that's not what I'm
Right.
saying, right? I think what is important is that the discourse of technology in our mainstream media and
Yeah,
actually
especially vernacular.
is not sophisticated
Yes.
and it's not informative in India. I think it's quite important that I think our,
Go on,
our
go on.
I think
discourse.
the evolution that is happening is that we were all focused on executing for someone to give productivity. And now that evolution, I mean, how we are evolving to creating something which actually drives the world. And it's happening in India as much as it is happening. So I think I disagree that it's more islands. I think the islands are getting connected more because the emphasis on innovation is much more today than it ever was because of the constraints that the new technologies like artificial intelligence, deep learning, data are putting on ourselves or removing from ourselves, which constrain ourselves to, we were happy making money
Yeah.
while executing. Now we cannot make that money, and so now we are innovating, and I think that's a huge evolution that is happening in our country, and we need to help that. And coming back to the previous one of engineers not being ready, I think industry has as much responsibility as academia has. Yeah. Our internship programs have to become much more real. I mean, these days internship for us, some companies is like, okay, now we have to do it. We get few people, they stay with us for 2 months, they go back. That is the time to get the skilling in.
So one of the issues I have is going back to the education system, and that kind of relates to all the things that we are talking about, is our education system makes us lazy. We are not very interested in knowledge assimilation, right? Because we are told this textbook, this problems, you finish it, you're done, right? So our ability to hence imbibe knowledge and go look at knowledge assimilation is low, and that has to change fundamentally. And the same thing, even when you are trying to, even if you give free things to employees in companies, they don't want to do it. It's just absolute. At times you feel, why I'm giving everything for you for free? Why are you not doing it? Because I think there's no inherent willingness to assimilate knowledge, and I think that's a fundamental issue at times. Very painful.
So,
Go on, Sanjay.
if I
Go
may.
on.
So, going back to the innovation part, and I think you raised a fantastic point. See, one of the biggest innovations, in my opinion, that has happened recently has been out of India. It's the India stack and the availability of APIs from a public-private partnership for any company in India to build applications towards digitizing India. And the number of companies who are leveraging it is increasing every day. And I think this is going to be a big, big wave of innovation that happens.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to the audience. And generally, I'd like it if the audience wants to know how to go global and ask questions that want to make you a global company, right? So one round of applause, please, for these great gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you.